There's a study out this week that basically puts a clinical name on something women have been describing for years. That maddening feeling of not knowing if what you're experiencing is actually perimenopause, or just stress, or just life. Turns out that uncertainty itself is a measurable phenomenon, and it has consequences.
Hi there, I'm Tony Lee, and this is Hot Flasher, your daily menopause podcast that serves up fresh news, research, and wellness tips. I've built a daily news pipeline to find the latest on women's health and menopause research. Allow me to introduce my co-host, Nikki, who handles the headlines. Take it away, Nikki.
Thanks, Tony. We've got a good one to wrap up the week. I want to start with something that came out of the NAMS, or TAMS journal, on menopause. This week, because it's one of those studies that does something genuinely useful. It gives a name and a clinical framework to something women have already been living. The paper is called Exploring Prevalence and Drivers of Perimenopause Uncertainty Among US Women. And it's a mixed methods study, which means it combines survey data with qualitative interviews, both the numbers and the actual words women use to describe their experience. And what they found is that perimenopause uncertainty is not just a feeling, it's a clinically distinct, measurable phenomenon. Distinct, meaning it's not the same kind of uncertainty you'd feel if you were diagnosed with an illness and didn't know what would happen next. This is a different thing. It's the uncertainty of not even knowing what's happening to your body, whether what you're feeling is real, whether it counts, whether you're even in perimenopause at all. If you've been in any of the menopause communities online, perimenopause, menopause, you've read some version of this 1,000 times. I've been to 3 doctors and nobody can tell me if this is perimenopause. My blood work was normal, so they said I was fine. Is this anxiety or is this perimenopause? Is there even a difference? The paper essentially says, yes, this confusion is real, it's widespread, and it has consequences. The researchers found that the ambiguity comes from multiple directions. Symptom patterns are highly variable between women, so there's no clean set of signs that confirms you're in the transition. Knowledge gaps are significant. Women often don't know what perimenopause looks like before they're in it. And neither, frankly, do a lot of their doctors. And then there's limited validation, meaning women try to get answers and either get dismissed, get a normal lab result waved at them, or get told to come back in a year. My take on this is pretty clear. The uncertainty isn't a personal failing. It's a structural problem. Perimenopause doesn't have a single diagnostic marker the way some conditions do. And the medical system has historically been set up to wait for menopause to be confirmed, 12 consecutive months without a period, before having certain conversations, which means a lot of women spend months or years wondering what is happening to them with nobody to tell them definitively. The paper's recommendation is essentially clarify symptom patterns, close knowledge gaps, and reduce barriers to confirmation, which is the right recommendation. It also involves rebuilding something about how primary care handles this transition, which is a longer road. The fact that there's now a peer-reviewed framework for perimenopause uncertainty matters because it gives clinicians a way to talk about it that isn't just, we'll watch and wait. If a researcher can measure it, a clinician can address it. That's progress, even if it's slow. The other study this week I want to spend some time on is a randomized controlled feasibility trial of something called compassionate mind training, CMT, for low mood and anxiety during the menopause transition. This was also in the NAMS journal, and it's genuinely worth knowing about. CMT is a structured, group-based psychological intervention. It's rooted in compassion-focused therapy, which draws on neuroscience and evolutionary psychology. The idea being that humans have a threat response system that is very easy to activate and much harder to calm down, and that training yourself towards self-compassion can actually shift how the brain regulates emotion. It's not just be nicer to yourself, it has a clinical methodology behind it. The trial recruited women in the menopause transition who were experiencing low mood and anxiety and ran them through a group CMT program. It was a feasibility trial, so the goal wasn't to prove effectiveness at scale. It was to test whether the intervention is practical, whether women will actually show up and engage with it, and whether early signals in the data are worth pursuing. The answers to all three of those questions appear to be yes. Feasibility was supported. Participants found it acceptable, and the quantitative and qualitative findings both suggested potential benefits for mental health and quality of life. Now, I want to be careful here about what feasibility means versus it works. A feasibility trial is not the end of the story. The researchers themselves say a fully powered effectiveness trial is the next step. And that trial hasn't happened yet. So, I'm not going to tell you CMT is a proven treatment for menopause-related anxiety. What I will say is that the signal is promising enough that the research community thinks it's worth doing the bigger trial. And that's meaningful. What I find genuinely useful about CMT as a concept is that it's a non-hormonal, non-pharmaceutical option that is specifically designed for the psychological terrain of this transition, not adapted from a generic anxiety protocol, not a one-size-fits-all mindfulness app. The group format also matters. There's evidence across other conditions that group-based psychological interventions carry benefits that solo practice doesn't, partly because of the validation and shared experience. For women who can't use HRT or who are managing mood symptoms that exist alongside hormonal treatment and haven't fully resolved, this is the kind of approach that's worth watching. If you want to look into compassionate mind training yourself, and this is weekend wellness, so worth considering, there are workbooks and online courses built on compassion-focused therapy principles. Paul Gilbert, who developed CFT, has published accessible materials. It's not something you can fully replicate on your own versus a structured program, but getting familiar with the framework isn't a bad use of a Saturday afternoon. And then there's the Elysium story, which I want to handle carefully because the headline is doing some heavy lifting. NutraIngredients, which is a trade publication for the nutrition and supplements industry, ran a piece saying Elysium's supplement shows promise for menopause symptoms. Elysium makes a supplement based on NR, nicotinamide riboside, which is a precursor to NAD+. NAD+ declines with age, which is real, and there's legitimate research interest in whether NAD+ precursors have any clinically meaningful effects in aging-related conditions. The problem with the headline is the phrase, shows promise. That language can mean almost anything. In peer-reviewed research, it means early signal from a study that warrants further investigation. In a trade publication reporting on a supplement brand, it can mean the company ran a small internal study, commissioned research that hasn't been independently replicated, or had results that were statistically detectable but not necessarily clinically meaningful. I looked for an independent, peer-reviewed trial of Elysium's product specifically for menopause symptoms, and as of this week I couldn't find one indexed in PubMed.
What exists is research on NR and NAD+ more broadly, some of which is genuinely interesting, none of which has been specifically validated for hot flashes, sleep disruption, or mood in the menopause transition in a rigorous trial. So, where does that leave us? NR research is real science. Whether it translates to meaningful menopause symptom relief at the doses in a commercial supplement is a different question, and the honest answer is we don't know yet. Shows promise in a NutraIngredients article is not the same as showed effectiveness in a controlled trial. Those are different bars, and I think you deserve to know which one you're reading. If you're already taking NR for other reasons, nothing here is a reason to stop. But if someone is looking to drop money on this, specifically for menopause symptoms based on this week's headline, I'd wait for the peer-reviewed data. Thanks for spending the week with us. If Hot Flasher has been useful to you, hit subscribe wherever you listen. It's the best way to make sure you don't miss an episode. Have a great weekend. I'll see you Monday.
That's our week. Thanks for listening to Hot Flasher. We'll be back on Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone.